The Travel Lodge on Route 66 had seen better days. Cracked neon signs flickered occasionally, casting erratic shadows over the peeling paint and chipped concrete. When Robert Landis accepted a job as a night clerk, he didn't expect much beyond a meager paycheck and an endless cycle of insomniac travelers. He was wrong. His first night behind the desk felt uneventful, just the buzzing of fluorescent lights and the hum of the ancient ice machine. An hour after midnight, a pair of glinting headlights pierced through the windshield, illuminating the cracked parking lot. A rusty sedan came to a halt, and an elderly man stepped out, his figure stooping and fragile. "Check in for one, please," he rasped, placing a bony hand on the desk as he filled out the registration form. Robert noticed the man's trembling fingers as he scribbled his name. "Room 7, Robert said, handing over the key with a faint smile. The old man shuffled away, mumbling incoherently. As Robert returned to his paperwork, he heard something, a low, scratching sound that seemed to emanate from beyond the walls. He paused, listening intently. The noise was like claws scraping against wood, persistent and disquieting. The sound stopped suddenly, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, and the minutes crawled by. A few guests came and went, nothing out of the ordinary, until 2 a.m., when a piercing scream shattered the stillness. Robert shot up from his seat, heart racing. It came from room 7. He dashed down the dimly lit corridor, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead as he reached the door. "Sir?" he called, knocking gently. No response. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach. With no answer, he pushed the door open, revealing a scene far from what he expected. The room was a mess, furniture was overturned, and the elderly man lay on the floor, eyes wide in horror, mouth agape as if he had just witnessed something unspeakable. Robert rushed to him, but something caught his eye. In the far corner, shadows seemed to twist and stretch unnaturally, coalescing into a figure just beyond perception. Before he could react, the figure lunged forward. It bore no face, just a void, a revelation of nightmares waiting to be unleashed. Robert stumbled back, heart pounding as he dragged the old man away from the figure, his instincts fighting against the surreal horror. Suddenly, another bang echoed in the corridor. His co-worker, Jackson, burst through the door, breathless. "Call 911!" he shouted. "We—" But the figure was upon them now, a swirling mass of darkness that swallowed the light whole. Jackson's scream was cut off as the figure absorbed him, leaving only the echo of terror. Robert, paralyzed with fear, scrambled to his feet and bolted for the exit, the remaining guests' doors creaking ominously, as if they, too, had heard the call of something dark. He reached the front door, but it wouldn't budge. Behind him, whispers began to fill the air, soft, enticing, promising knowledge and power, but laced with malice. He turned to face room 7, the door now standing wide open. The old man was gone, the shadows laughing, tempting him with truth. In that moment, a realization dawned. The motel wasn't simply a place of respite, it was a gateway, a trap for anyone who dared linger too long. And Robert was its newest keeper, destined to unravel the secrets of the darkness lurking within. The old Oakwood Inn had stood for decades, a relic of a bygone era, with creaky floorboards and faded wallpaper that whispered tales of all the guests who had passed through its doors. It was the kind of place where the walls seemed to breathe, drawing in secrets and exhaling shadows. Oliver, the night clerk, had manned the lobby desk for nearly a year, and while he'd seen his share of eccentric travelers, he never anticipated the night he would meet the one who would haunt him for the rest of his days. It was a dreary October evening. Rain lashed against the windows, and the wind howled like a mournful spirit. Oliver sat behind the desk, flipping through a dog-eared book on local legends, half listening to the muted television that flickered in the corner. The inn had been quiet that night, a calm before the storm of Halloween. Just as he considered closing up early, the grandfather clock chimed ominously, and the front door creaked open. A chill swept through the lobby as a figure stepped inside. Oliver looked up to find a tall man, cloaked entirely in shadows, his face obscured by the brim of a wide hat.
"Good evening,"
the stranger said, his voice gravelly, smooth like dark chocolate, though it gave Oliver an inexplicable sense of dread. The man's clothing was outdated, reminiscent of a Victorian ball. "Welcome to Oakwood Inn. How can I assist you tonight?" Oliver's usual pleasantries were tinged with unease.
"I seek shelter,"
the stranger replied, his smile stretching just a bit too wide.
"I'll need a room for the night."
"Of course. I just need your name and identification," Oliver said, reaching for the check-in book. The man hesitated, the flickering lights above casting unsettling shadows on his visage.
"You may refer to me as Mr. Gray," he said,
his eyes glinting with something dark and unfathomable. As Oliver scribbled the name, he stole a glance at Mr. Gray's hands. They were unnaturally long, fingers tapering into sharp points that seemed to curl and flex like dried twigs. "Room 204 will be fine," Oliver managed to say, handing over the key as an eerie shiver danced down his spine. "Do you need assistance with your bags?"
"No,"
Mr. Gray replied, turning on his heel with a fluid grace that sent a jolt of unease through Oliver. The man's long coat swept behind him like smoke as he moved toward the stairs. Hours passed, yet sleep eluded Oliver. Every creak of the inn seemed to echo louder, reverberating in the stillness. Finally, the clock struck midnight, its chimes a malicious reminder that something was off. The peace shattered when the fire alarm screamed to life, jolting Oliver from his chair. He rushed to find the source of the chaos, his heart racing. He stumbled, disoriented, down dim corridors, drawn toward the source of the alarm. As he reached room 204, the door swung open, revealing a sight that curdled his blood. Mr. Gray stood in the center of the room, the blackened walls pulsating with dread. Shadows writhed around his form like tendrils of smoke, and the air turned heavy with an ancient, suffocating malevolence. "What have you done?" Oliver gasped in horror. Mr. Gray turned slowly, his smile now a wicked grin, revealing teeth sharp and jagged.
"I bring stories, young clerk," he hissed, "and the night is just beginning."
With that, he vanished into the dark, leaving Oliver alone, a witness to an unspeakable malevolence, forever trapped in the echoes of the Oakwood Inn. As the alarm faded, he realized that sometimes the stories that haunt you are not just tales, but the shadows of those who once walked among us. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a dusky glow over the desolate neighborhood of Elmwood Heights. Ivy climbed the walls of dilapidated houses, their windows clouded with dust, obscuring any sign of life within. As 18-year-old Mira strolled down the cracked pavement, earbuds nestled snugly in her ears, she brushed aside the unease that clung to the air like a thick fog. It was just another evening, and the world outside her headphones felt distant and muted. But then she heard it, a faint whimper cutting through the music. Instinct kicked in, and she pulled the earbuds out, scanning her surroundings. The sound seemed to come from behind an old flaking fence that surrounded what used to be a small park. Curiosity piqued, she stepped off the path and pushed through the overgrown brush. Nestled in the weeds was a small, dirt-caked puppy, its fur a matted brown and its eyes wide with fear. Mira knelt beside it, heart pounding. The little creature looked up, tongue lolling as if it were in desperate need of a friend. It wagged its tail, though weakly, and Mira felt a wave of compassion wash over her. "Hey there, little guy," she whispered, gently reaching out. The puppy flinched, but made no move to escape, its skinny body quivering slightly. She carefully scooped it up, cradling the trembling form against her chest. "I'll take care of you," she promised, though she couldn't help but wonder what had happened to its owner. As she turned to leave, a raspy voice echoed through the trees, sending chills down her spine.
Don't take him.
Mira froze, her breath hitching as dread filled the air. The voice was laden with a darkness that echoed against the hollowed surroundings. She squinted into the twilight shadows, but there was nothing but trees and silence. Panic surged through her, but the puppy nuzzled into her embrace, grounding her. She couldn't just leave him. Urgency propelled her home, and as she settled into her modest apartment, she bathed the pup, working carefully to remove the dirt and tangles. The momentary comfort soothed them both, the little creature curling into her lap while she cradled him, whispering names. She settled on Rusty, but the inexplicable unease came creeping back through the night. As Mira turned down the lights, shadows danced across her walls. She tried to shake it off, focusing on Rusty, who was promptly curled up beside her, snoring lightly. She found herself drifting off, lulled by the steady sound. A muffled cry jolted her awake. Heart racing, she looked around, only to find the room empty. Rusty was gone. Panic surged in her chest as she jumped from her bed, scanning the room. The fuzzy outline of the puppy beneath her bed cast a stark contrast against the darkness. Rusty? Tentatively, she reached down and pulled him into her arms. But something felt off. He was heavier, the warmth that had surrounded them oozing away. Looking down, she gasped. Rusty's eyes had turned a sickly yellow, glassy and void of warmth, with a grinning mouth that revealed rows of jagged teeth. A low growl emanated from his throat, sending primal terror racing through her veins. The voice echoed again, closer this time.
You shouldn't have taken him.
The lights flickered, casting shadows that twisted and elongated, revealing lurking figures among the walls, watching, waiting. And as Rusty's growl deepened, Mira realized, too late, that she wasn't just fighting to save an abandoned puppy. She had stolen something far more sinister, a darkness that thrived on desperation and fear. And in that moment, she understood. In this forsaken place, once you choose to care, you were never alone.